This is a heavy duty metal cutting chop saw with a 14-inch blade, which I bought a year ago, and it cuts steel in a way that I'm not used to. So even if you're not a metal worker, I think you're going to find this interesting. This is the Evolution S355MCS, and 355 is the size of its blade, 355mm or 14 inches, which is a bit of a monster. Driving that, it's got a 2,200 watt motor, and although they call it a chop saw, I would call it a mitre saw because it's got a fully functioning mitre bed that you can cut steel at any angle. And because of the size of that blade, the maximum crosscut it can handle is 180mm by 95, which is, what's that, about 7 inches by just under 4. Not far off the size of a cross-section of a timber sleeper, but this will do it in steel, would you believe? So as I said, it's a bit of a monster. Let's firstly have a look at the bed. Let me come round. Now, a lot of the features on this chop saw, which I think is more like a mitre saw, are very similar to a timber saw, so I'm not going to go through everything, but there are a couple of differences. First of all, it's important when you cut in steel that you're coming down with the blade right on top of the subject. So if you're cutting a small bar, say, right up against the fence, the blade wants to be back, and if you're cutting something a little bit further towards you, the blade wants to be forward. Now this doesn't slide at all, it's not a slide-in mitre saw, but you can move the position of it at the back here. All you do is release it, and then you can easily move it to the front or move it to the back. Now the other important thing when you're cutting steel as opposed to timber is holding down the workpiece as you cut it. Now when we cut timber, normally we just hold it with one hand and cut it with the other. Now for metal, you really need that workpiece well clamped to the bed and the fence before you even start cutting. So almost you're just cutting it with one hand, you're not holding it with your left hand. And because of that, there's two fairly heavy duty clamps here with quick releases, which is a very nice touch. Now these clamps can be moved anywhere along the fence, and in fact, if you want to, this whole bar can actually get removed if you want it out the way. But if you, as I said, if you're cutting steel, you don't actually want that. You want that bar in place, and it's really important to use those clamps whenever you're cutting anything, whether it's a pipe or a bit of box section. The other thing this comes with is a couple of attachments that just fit onto the front of these clamps. They just slide on and then they just clip in place. They've got like a V notch section in the front of them, which means it's quite easy to clamp in things like tube, a hollow section, or maybe even a square section, but twisted at 45 degrees, so it's like a diamond shape. You've also got a clamp here that you can move in different parts of the fence here, just to clamp things down. Having said that, I've found that sometimes if I want to clamp in this position vertically, it does get in the way with the motor coming down, so you need to think a little bit about where you're going to clamp. It's okay for longer items because you can put it on the right hand side. On the left hand side, you're a little bit limited. Now, one of the advantages of this whole mitre saw is that it can cut mitres. So the most common 45-degree mitres, say, if you're going to weld two bits of tubular steel or box section together, you can deal with all of that in the normal way, just like any other mitre saw. Let's just take this bar off so you can see what I mean. So you've got a standard bed here, just like any other mitre saw, that you unscrew, put your thumb on, and you can turn it anything up to 45 or maybe just beyond on either side. And what I would say is this particular saw is pretty heavyweight. This is quite a nicely machined piece of kit. You've obviously got the standard indents at sort of 0, 30 degrees, 45, or you can set it to any other number just by tightening it up if you just wanted, let's say, 5 degrees there. Now, unusually, to dial it in so you get exactly 90-degree cut when you want a 90-degree cut, rather than using the fence to move it and get a fine adjustment, you don't do it that way because this fence is actually in two parts. Normally, they have a connection at the back, so if you move one side, then the other side moves, but this is in two parts, so it's probably best to leave that as it is. if you actually find that you're not at 90 degrees, the adjustment is on the indents and on the base rather than the fence. So all you do is you've got 3 screws here that you can undo, then put it to 90, and then in the same way as normal, you maybe get a square in there and make sure that you've got exactly 90 degrees to the fence, which I have because I've already set the thing up. So fairly easy to adjust. It's just slightly different to a standard timber mitre saw. But after saying all of that, that's all very well. But the reason that I'm doing this video is the way this cuts. Now, I'm used to cutting steel, especially in my younger days when we were on site, using abrasive discs. Now, those are the ones you'll see in angle grinders that produce all those sparks everywhere, and they also heat up the workpiece quite a bit. So if you're going to use an abrasive disc, expect the workpiece that you've just been working on to be hot afterwards. I've seen lots of people pick up bits of steel after they've been working and suddenly they regret it. So let's get a bit of PPE on, because this is quite a noisy machine. It's got quite a large motor and a full face visor, because it does chuck out the little chips everywhere. Oh, I forgot to mention, you can put a wood blade in this, a 355mm wood blade, and cut timber. So if you're cutting really large things like sleepers, this will be a good thing to use. However, the only drawback is it doesn't have dust extraction. Because this is set up as a steel cutting mitre saw, the chips just go everywhere, and there's a little box at the back there that they sort of end up in, but it hasn't got dust extraction. So in theory, if you put a wood blade in here, you can use it to cut wood. In practice, probably better just getting a wood cutting mitre saw. So yeah, let's get some PPE on. As I said, rather than just glasses, full face visor for something like this is really what's needed. So it not only protects your eyes, it protects your face. So let's cut a bit of steel. While I'm setting this bar up for a cut, I do need to point out that this saw is the top of the range, and as such will cost you not far short of £700. However, if you can do without the big heavy mitre bed and really just want fast, clean cuts, then the smaller version that's got the same motor and blade can do something very similar for less than £300. I'll put links to both of these in the description below. There is the cut, and that's how cold it is. It's not hot at all. A really, really nice, clean, burr-free cut. And this is what I found using this machine over the last year, is that the quality of the cuts, all the cuts, are absolutely superb. It's almost like a nice shiny edge. So if you're cutting steel to weld, and if you're cutting miters and things like that, you want it to be clean, you want it to be straight. It just helps the weld enormously. So let's move on to something else, as if we were going to weld 2 bits at right angle. So here I've got a piece of box section which is 50mm or 2 inches square with a wall size of around about 4mm, so fairly chunky. So all I've done is I've marked it up as if I want to cut 2 of these, and then bend that over and see if we can get a nice right angle welding this to this. So now we're going to flip round the saw to cut 45 degrees in the other direction. One thing you will notice is it actually gets through steel like this pretty quick. I'm not pushing too hard on it. I don't want to wear the blade out too quick, but it doesn't take long to do each cut. And once again, as I said, when you do the cut, it's cold to the touch. That's not even, I mean, it's not warm at all. So you don't have to worry about burning yourself. Right, let's get these 2 sections together and see how accurate they are. So there you go, that is with my magnetic square, and if you look at the joint, so that looks like quite a accurate, once it's set up and you've used your square to square the blade, then that looks like quite an accurate cut. You'll see how quickly this cuts through steel. So as you can imagine, you can actually cut through some thicker steel as well. So let's see if we can really, I wouldn't say push it to the limit, but do something a little bit bigger. Hey. So this is the biggest beam that I've got in here. Size-wise, it's not that big as when it comes to beams. It's about 102. So it's just over 100 mil in each direction. Now, I'm just about to make that mistake. Evolution, once again, say the best way of cutting this to save on blade is like this. So I'm not in a position to know any more than Evolution. I've got a really ragged end here because it's been plasma cut, so it's all over the place. But it's quite a hefty beam. From a DIY point of view, this is quite chunky. So let's just clamp this in, and also just make sure that it is clamped down as well. It might not be the biggest beam in the world, but you wouldn't want to try to get through that with a hacksaw. Once again, that clamp is getting in the way. So actually I'm just going to leave it off and make sure the others are well tight. Well, there you go. A nice, silvery, shiny, smooth, cold, I mean, that is cold, cut. Now, isn't that clever? I just think it's great when you get tools that just do what you think they're going to, and this is definitely one of them. These sort of results are not difficult to achieve at all. It's almost easier than cutting timber, almost more accurate than cutting timber, would you believe? And you're dealing with proper heavy duty box section. Obviously this isn't a cheap tool, and you can probably, I think, probably do 95% of what this does with its small baby brother that's about £300. Both of those and all the details I'll put in the description below, where you can get them on Amazon, which ironically is even cheaper than the Evolution website. There you go. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and you've learned a little bit about cutting steel. I will see you next time.